my first patient had been, shot multiple times with an AK-47. He had one round to the mouth and a couple more to his torso, and we were able to save his life. And so, I picture him at the time, and I'm a little terrified because you're alone. You're the only anesthesia person there, and so it's up to you to make these decisions. And obviously the decision is easy, right? You have to secure his airway, you have to give him blood, you have to try to prevent him from dying, right? That's the goal.
Well, we have a very special guest with us today, Chris Jorge. Jed and I were talking about, we need a medical professional to come on the podcast.
Sure.
And we really wanted to get a female. But instead we ended up with a nurse. So
that sounds almost negative. Chris Jorge, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad that you guys selected me to be your nurse. And I look forward to answering some questions and having a good time.
Yeah. Well, Chris, you're born and raised in Miami.
Sure.
Why did you become a nurse anesthetist?
I never wanted to be a nurse or a nurse anesthetist when I was growing up. I wanted to be an FBI agent. I watched the movies. I could see myself like sliding over the hood of a car and shooting somebody 17 times. But then, as life went on, I realized that they don't make a lot of money, and it's not exactly what I thought. Also, they do a lot of paperwork, and it's not like the movies where you're jumping out of a helicopter and things like that. And my dad was a surgeon, and he told me about that job and that they get paid well. You work in AC, make 6 figures. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And that's pretty much how I ended up doing that job. But it wasn't like a dream of mine. Like I wake up and say, oh, I want to do this or that. I still don't know what I want to do. I'm figuring that out. And but this has worked very well for me, and I'm happy I decided to do that.
Thanks for serving our country. And you talked about money, but your actions are actually the opposite of somebody who's motivated by money. You're motivated by this country, by being an American. Yeah. I mean, sure. I watched you grow up with Brett.
Mm-hmm.
I watched you guys through high school, through college. I watched you both start your families, have kids. And I've never been more shocked when Brett told me that you were going to go not only join the military, but then go to Afghanistan. What inspired that?
It goes back to picturing my days of jumping over the hood of a car with a machine gun. Same concept, and I wanted to join the Marines when I was 17. I've always enjoyed physical stuff like that. I didn't go to the Marines at the time. I was a kid. My mom would have to sign, and she would hang up on the recruiter and do everything she could to avoid me going. And then once I was in anesthesia school, I decided to join then. It wasn't going to be as action-packed, but I could still serve, right? And I always felt that, I think it's a duty to serve your country. When I was younger, I bought into that a lot more. As you get wiser and older, you kind of see that there's a lot of stuff that you don't realize when you're a kid, and you're more idealistic. So that drive has vanished to an extent, but I still love my country. I'm grateful that I'm here. And if, anytime I have the opportunity to serve, I would do it, and I highly recommend other people do it. In reference to, Afghanistan, I was in the Army Reserves, and I spent about 10 years in there. I made it to captain. I was on a forward surgical team, which basically means that we do trauma. So if you're in a combat theater and you get injured, you can get shot, blown up, car accident, whatever type of trauma, you would come to us. And we would only get casualties that are extremely hurt, that probably would not make it all the way back to a combat hospital, which they call a CASH, or combat support hospital. And so we would be in the middle of nowhere, and then a helicopter would usually come in and drop somebody off, or multiple. It's usually not just one person, multiple people, and then you secure them, right? So, it could be in the just stopping the bleeding. If they have like an arterial bleed where they're bleeding out and they could die, you'll get with the surgeon, you put them to sleep. give them anesthesia if they need it, and then get them under control, right? Whether it's stop bleeding, start giving them blood products, give them narcotics, pressors. There's a team of us. There's usually about 10 of us. And then after that, we only have him for about 45 minutes to an hour, save his life, and then send him to a hospital for a higher level of care. It's an extraordinary experience. It's very nerve-wracking, but you get a very good sense of pride out of it, knowing that you're saving. And these are kids. I mean, my first patient had been, shot multiple times with an AK-47. He had one round to the mouth and a couple more to his torso, and we were able to save his life. And so, I picture him at the time, and I'm a little terrified because you're alone. You're the only anesthesia person there, and so it's up to you to make these decisions. And obviously the decision is easy, right? You have to secure his airway, you have to give him blood, you have to try to prevent him from dying, right? That's the goal. But the pressure's there, right? And he's not alone. He came with 4 other people who were shot. And so now you're making, life decisions on, where's this guy going to go? If I pick the wrong guy, could he die? And then, you kind of feel like that could be on your conscience to an extent. So the pressure's high, but it's like anything, it's probably similar to when you have to go to a trial and it's a big case and somebody had a tragedy, and it's up to you to make sure that you right that wrong. There's a lot of pressure, right? And so you just kind of rise to the occasion and do the best that you can and hope for the best. And in my case, we did very well. We had a great team, and we saved a lot of lives, and we helped a lot of people.
And they actually gave you a gun that you get to in the Army?
They did. That's funny. They issue everyone guns. Fortunately, when you go to a combat zone, that's a funny story because before you deploy, they send you to a base. In my case, I went to Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas. It's a tank base, right? So there's always big tanks rolling around. And so they start preparing you. They give you clothes. They gave me Kevlar underwear, which I thought were cool. I'm wearing them now, actually. And so that's basically if like a bomb goes off under you.
Bulletproof boxers?
Yeah, bulletproof boxers. You got them too? So, stuff like that. And then, they give you some training. They roll you over in a car and you have to take off your seatbelt upside down, and then there's noise. And so they try to
gas you and everything?
They gas you. Not at that base, but during training, I was gassed. And so, but I made it out.
People didn't tell you you're crazy. Like you're leaving behind. You just said like you're a kid. You go out to the military right when you're 18. Before you have a family, before you have a kids, before you have a career, you did the opposite. You built your family.
8-month-old.
I had an 8-month-old. He was 3 actually. When I got back, he was 8 months. And you're right. I was in, and so to me, if you're in the military and you have the opportunity to go to a combat zone, you should take it, right? To me, it's like going to the Super Bowl, and that's kind of how I framed it. I was obviously, it's probably, for self-preservation, not the greatest decision, but, I look at statistics, right? And there's over hundreds of thousands of soldiers. I think total casualties in Afghanistan were 3,000. I'm starting to crunch the numbers. I said, I'll probably be okay. And then you get to experience that, right? And you get to help, and then you can always go back and say, hey, I'm a combat veteran. You did it, and you made a big sacrifice on behalf of your country, and this country's given me a lot. I was born here, but my parents, it's a very typical Miami Cuban story. They come from, Fidel Castro in the late 1950s, and they have to start from scratch, and they did very well. My grandparents, my parents, they all did well. It's typical of that generation of Cubans, but who made it possible was the United States of America. And so, that's just a small token of my appreciation. And that's kind of how I look at it. And I still look at it that way to this day.
The experience that you had in Afghanistan, how did that shape who you are as a person now?
I think it was a great experience. I think that it lets you know that you have some balls, right? Because, everybody can say one thing or do another, but when you have to sign the paper and then you're going to give, you're going to sacrifice that. To me, it's even more so because I'm already established. I have a good career. I have a family. And so you're giving up more than just a typical, 17, 18-year-old kid, right? Not to say that's less or more, but I'm just saying there's more to think about, right? And the camaraderie, going out there with a team, you really build some special connections with the people you deploy with. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And, everything happens for a reason. You make those type of decisions and you live with them. And sometimes they go your way and sometimes they don't. This went my way. And it's been paying dividends ever since. I mean, I started an anesthesia company called Nurse Anesthesia before I left, right? And when I got back to the States, I start working again. And I bump into a plastic surgeon who's a good friend of mine, Sergio Alvarez. At the time, he's a new up-and-coming surgeon. He's good. He's talented. You can tell that he's got a very bright future ahead of him. And he loves anything associated with military stuff. He was doing some good work with Navy SEALs and working at the VA and helping combat veterans under surgical conditions. And so him and I cross paths. And he says, oh, who are you? Who am I? We start talking. We start working together. He's a great plastic surgeon. I like to think of myself as a pretty good anesthesia provider. And so we start clicking. And then, we end up working together every single day. And then a couple of years go by and he ends up opening up his own practice. And that practice ends up exploding and he does very well. And then he asked me to be a part of it, right? And so I start covering all of his anesthesia. And the next thing you know, I have a very big business. When before, I was going to make 150, 200 grand, whatever they paid nurse anesthetists at the time. And I was going to be happy with that. But, medicine's a tough business. You only have two hands, right? You're not going to be able to, you can only do so much with two hands and 12 hours in a day. Right. And so all of a sudden he has a lot of good business principles. He starts teaching me, I start growing a business. And the next thing you know, I'm making extra income based off of this lucrative business, but all of it or a lot of it born from that military experience.
And now your focus is mostly like cosmetic procedures.
Correct. As far as the anesthesia that we supply, 95% of my business is through Sergio, that plastic surgeon, and his company, Me Aesthetics, great company. Highly recommend it. That's my plug. I get a plug. Goldberg and Rosen, by the way, if you've been injured in a car. And if you ever had problems with anesthesia, if you see Samas, don't call these guys. Samas anesthesia, stay away from them. But no, seriously, it's been good, and we've had a great time. And I've been blessed to have great friends, great people around me, great experiences. And I'm sure there's a lot more to come.
I know a big part of your life is health.
Sure.
Like every day you work out, you eat healthy, you focus on making yourself better. What inspired that?
Ever since I was a kid, I've always been active. We spoke about that. We alluded to it earlier, right? You too. We like to be outside. We like to do things that are healthy. My dad used to work out, more of like a bodybuilder type. He would lift heavy weights, but I'd see him in the gym and, I'd want to have big muscles. I never got big muscles, but I am in pretty good shape. So, that was one of the things. And then as I get older, I'm 43, your back starts to hurt a little bit. You don't get up from the ground as quick and things like that. And so I've just kind of really wanted to enjoy my life, right? And the healthy lifestyle. Because to me, it's not just about how long you can live, it's how long you can be active and enjoying your life. And so with the medical background that I have and nursing background, I love to read and I'm always trying to educate myself. And so I study it a lot and I try to stay in shape. I'll check my labs and, I offer my friends advice on how to stay in shape. And I think it's just really important. Overall, there's nothing that helps my mental health and my ability to do hard tasks than being in shape or working out. I mean, it is like it's like a Hoover vacuum for problems. I could be having a terrible day, but if I can find time to go to the gym and I can knock out a good workout and I get that hour in and I sweat and I get a pump and I feel good, I mean, it washes away a lot of trouble. And so, that alone inspires me, especially when you have a high level job. You guys have high level jobs. I have high level jobs. There's a ton of stress. There's a lot of people who depend on you and things go wrong, just like in anything, right? And so you have to have outlets. And that's one of my main outlets.
I always, whenever we talk about my cases,
Sure.
or I get your advice, I always say you should have been a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
You would have been the best lawyer I know.
That's very, That's very kind of you. Thank you for saying that. You guys are both excellent attorneys. I think both of you would have been better than me. And we actually have an additional attorney here today that's very impressive. Also, I'm outnumbered, outgunned. But yeah, I think you know, I like to tell stories, right? And I think that and you guys would know better than me, but in a courtroom in front of a jury, I definitely wouldn't want to be a contract lawyer that's like in front of paper or something. I'd want to put on a show. You know, I'd want to stand in front of 12 people and take on that obligation of having a client or a victim and really telling the story to try to sway those people in my direction.
Well, we had that experience, right?
We did.
Judd and I tried a case for one of our good friends who's also a lawyer.
That's right.
And why don't you tell the story about you
Sure.
being the star witness?
Star witness here. So we have a mutual friend. He's an attorney. He has a not malpractice, but a personal injury case. And they need me as a witness to speak about how his life was beforehand versus how it is post-injury. This is a brutal group of friends here. We all love each other. We've been friends forever, but I mean, you gotta have tough skin to be friends with this group, in a good way, kind of like a fraternity. So they call me and they're like, Chris, I need you to tell me about Mike's life, or you gotta edit that out. There's a lot of Mikes out there.
There's a lot of Mike.
You know, a fat bald Mike that's an attorney. Now we're kind of narrowing it down. Low self-esteem, hairy back. So anyways, that's what I'm talking about. That's the stuff I'm talking about as far as, you know, having tough skin. So we go in there.
They pay him extra for the hairy back.
I feel bad for him.
That's right. I think it's associated with all lawyers.
Yeah. The jury was all liking your jokes, but the judge wasn't smiling.
The judge wasn't. So I walk in and Judd is Judd's like 8 years, maybe 9 years older than me. He's a little more intimidating. Brett is a friend that we've grown up every day together, and so it's you know, more camaraderie. So I walk in, I'm thinking, I wonder who's gonna ask me questions, you know. And then I'm watching Judd, and he's sitting there with his beautiful suit on. It fits him perfectly, you know. And he just kind of like, you know, moves over his head and he whispers something to Brett, and Brett just, you know, nods. And the next thing you know, they call me to the witness stand and Brett gets up. And I said, oh, Brett's going to do this? I said, so now I have one friend sitting on one side, you know, who's the plaintiff, right? Is that the plaintiff? Yeah. And then I have Judd in there who's intimidating. Then I have Brett, the one that a dear friend of mine that's going to start asking me questions. And all of this is, you know, I'm processing this information. I'm supposed to talk about Mike, who I'm dying to make fun of in this entire courtroom, you know? And so I sit down and Brett's looking at his papers and I can see him collecting himself. And then at the moment he looks up and we make eye contact, I wanted to burst out in laughs, you know? And I got all the wood with the judge, and I don't spend any time in a courtroom, right? This is a new experience to me. I feel like I'm on Matlock, or not Matt. That's kind of old.
Yeah.
You know, you got the idea. So, you know, it ended up being like night court by the end of it. I want another old one. So, anyways, he looks.
They're both remade.
Yeah, they're both remade. So yeah, that's okay. And then I start I almost bust out laughing, but I just look down, I bite my lip, and I see him at the peripheral. He looks down because he's about to start laughing. And we're like, dude, we got to take this. Is like a serious thing, you know? So I compose myself, and then he looks up and he starts asking me questions. And you know, we knocked it out of the park as usual. You know, we were able to settle down, and then we knocked it out. But I was dying to have fun with it, but there's too much at stake, you know.
And that other lawyer didn't pick up on the fact that we're best friends and that we come together.
Exactly. You know, we're
gotta ask those questions.
She didn't ask.
She didn't ask. So, you know, and you know, they didn't ask me much. It was more of what you know, the personal stuff, you know, that Mike does. And so, you know, it was fun. It was
I think we brought you in here with the idea that you'd share some of your expertise on being an esthetician and also the anesthesiology aspect of it. But the way this has shaped in, you're really coming across to me, and I have a whole new appreciation as an expert in life. You know, you figured out how to, number one, balance being a wonderful father, husband, professional, American, and keep your friends from the time you were a kid up until today's day. And that, to me, is what this is all about. Because you could have all the degrees in the world, you could be the best surgeon in the world, but if you don't have balance, physical health, mental health, challenges in life, family, and friends, it's all for nothing.
I couldn't say it any better. I think that you really outlined all the things that are important to me, right? And I think if once you figure out what's important and you balance them, you're setting the stage for a lot of success. And for the record, I'm not an esthetician. You have some blackheads, Brett, but I'm not touching them. Aesthetics is different. I'm not the skin guy. I've been looking at that blackhead this whole time, but you're safe. Trust me. No, I'm just kidding. It's a play on words. Anesthetist. But yeah, man, we have fun. We have fun at work. I wish I could work with you guys. You know, if they had an honorary degree, we would have a great time together. And I know we would do some good stuff.
I'm sure you've injected my brother a couple times with something.
Semen. Oh. Just kidding. Just kidding. Dude, sorry. Just, hey guys, smash that like button. Oh, that's good. For the record, never. No, Brett, dude. Speaking of Brett, because I am a valuable friend. I can do your Botox. I can do your filler. My house on a Saturday, there's like 7 girls there. They're getting IVs. They're getting Botox. They're getting filler. Then I'm ordering them peptides and all this. And they're feeling great. They're looking great. And I don't charge them. I just make them pay for whatever it is because it makes me happy to help people. I've always been that way. I'll shirt off my back. That's why I love Brett. That's why I love Judd. I've been in trouble. I've had problems, and these guys always will have my back. You know, they're just a phone call away. You know what I mean? And whether it's in trouble, whether it's life experiences, whether it's advice, I can always count on you guys. And so, you know, those are the type of relationships that are important. So yeah, I mean, I don't even know where I was going. I was just giving you compliments.
You just chase me around with them.
Oh yeah, Brett won't take anything. He won't take a thing. Like no Botox, no nothing. I was like, dude, come on, look at the blackheads. I was like the esthetician thing. Just kidding. No, but you know, he looks great. You look fantastic. And so, you know, you're both healthy. You have a very strong lifestyle. You have a great balance. Everything that Judd said about me, I feel the same way about both of them. I think that they've mastered life, and, you know, and it's probably, you know, it's a whole relationship, you know, and we learn from each other, and that's how we do it.
Thanks for being with us.
Hey, it was a pleasure.
Really enjoyed it.
Great chat.
Me too.